I met him actually between my first year of college and my second year of college. That summer I had come home and gone to work, and he was in the same place I worked. He was older than me by 12 years, so that made a lot more interest on my part because he wasn't like those college boys. He also was very much about paying attention to me and wanting to go places and do things, and he had money, and it was exciting. It was wonderful to feel special, and I really, really was drawn to him. We had decided we were going to get married. I kind of knew a little bit that maybe this wasn't my best decision. Within the month that we were married and settled back in Ohio, things began to change. He got much more interested in where I was, what I was doing, where I was going, who I was doing it with. The romance stopped. The concern about, oh, I want to take care of you, became possessive instead. Instead of the compliments, turned to criticism. My friends started to disappear because he claimed he wanted to spend all his time with me. I did not understand that he was isolating me at that point. Having money to do fun things suddenly disappeared, and it was, we don't have enough money for food. So overall, it really moved from what I thought of as light and just wonderful to really a pretty dark place for me. I became anxious. I became depressed with all of this. I didn't know what to do. I didn't have peace. One of the best illustrations I have, it's like putting a heavy blanket on top of you. Another thing happens. He gets mad at me, picks a fight so that we don't go to a party because he doesn't want me to meet other people. That's another blanket going on top. Another time where he accuses me of being out with other people because he's checked my odometer on my car. It's another blanket going on top. So as you see these things going on top of each other, the feeling, if you can imagine, feel the weight and the heaviness of all those blankets. And inside of all of that, you can't breathe, you can't move, you can't make decisions. Because you love someone, you want to ignore a lot of that stuff. And you don't want to admit to yourself that maybe you didn't pick wisely. Having grown up in church, I knew God was there somewhere, but I didn't have the personal relationships, so it really didn't factor in much. And so it never occurred to me really that God might have an vested interest in me. So instead of God being a piece of the equation, I turned to self-help books. I kind of turned to friends a little bit. I wasn't really supposed to say anything because he threatened me not to say anything about our private life. And I had been brought up that you are not to give up on marriage and that you don't just give up on relationships when things get hard. So I kept trying to change me to fit him. We had moved back living with my parents, but things were getting progressively worse. He wasn't making money. He was getting more and more angry. In the middle of this, it was late August, we took a family weekend and went up to my folks' place in New Hampshire. It's on this small lake. It's where we'd been going for vacations since my kids were little, but I knew I was wrestling with all of this. We'd gone to bed. All there was probably on was a dim night light out in the hallway. I woke up in the middle of the night and it was quiet. And I started wrestling with, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? Do I leave? Do I stay? And a voice spoke to me and said, get out. And so, in my great wisdom, I decided to wrestle or argue with God about this, now that I understand that that was the voice, and said, well, I guess I could, but I know that's not what I want. I mean, I don't want to split this up. I'm worried about the boys. I'm worried about what people will say. Maybe we could just split for a while, separate. And the voice said, get out now. And I decided that was not something to argue with. And if God was telling me that, I had to trust that he had my best interest at heart. And that really settled it in my heart and my mind that that was what I needed to do. So at that point, I knew something had to change. I had considered filing for divorce a number of different times and backed out. I was afraid because he had always told me that if I tried to leave, he would keep the children and I would never have them. I filed. I did not tell him. This is really scary stuff because I know he's not real stable. While I was waiting to have them serve the papers, he came home one night. My folks were not around, and sat me down. The kids were in bed, asked me how much I thought a human life was worth. And I told him I did not know. And he told me it's worth $5,000 because that's what I've paid someone to have you killed. He stayed downstairs. I went upstairs. I slept in my children's room. They were in one room together. And I slept against the door on the floor because I didn't know what was going to happen. And so the next morning I had to call a lawyer and tell her I needed a restraining order as well and why. And then I had to wait. That was a Wednesday. Thursday was my 30th birthday, and he disappeared that night. So they had to wait to serve the papers until he showed up. He'd come home in the morning, his glasses were all askew. He immediately threw his clothes in the washing machine, which was incredibly atypical. When the sheriff showed up, handed him the papers and said, "You have to vacate," he was out there, he was gone. I did not know where he was, what he was doing. I was thrilled he was away from me, but I had no idea what he was going to do. My sense is he was either going to just drop everything and go somewhere else and start over, or he was going to be angry enough to have some revenge on, I thought, me. The next Monday morning, I got a call from a friend and the police. They said they were looking for him. And truthfully, I thought he had gone to the only friends he had, who was a business partner of his, who had lent him money for his business he was trying to run. I walked out where the television was on, and there is that yellow police crime scene tape across the front of a house. It's that teaser for the 11 o'clock news. And it was the people's house that I thought was the only one he would go to. And I knew then that he had done something much worse. I knew he was angry at me. I was afraid for my life. What I didn't know was he also was angry at everything else going on in his life. That night he was gone. He went to their house. He had an argument. Then he killed that family, the husband, the wife, and the daughter. Got a man in a murderous rage who is out loose now because he was kicked out of the house. I have no idea where he's going. And after the threats, I'm sure it was me that he was after next.
Hightower did have a gun with as many as 38 rounds of ammunition with him.
This is Newswatch 10's continuing coverage of the Hightower trial.
There was so much healing that needed to happen. It was hard to know where to begin. So I had daily counseling, just trying to process what had happened. You know, though, with all those blankets on, I didn't know who I was. Restraining order was kind of like pulling off another one. With the finding the family he'd killed, that was pulling off yet another one. It was a back and forth and a back and forth as I slowly, very slowly healed. One of the long-term things was forgiveness. I couldn't for years. I was angry. I was angry at God. I was angry at everything for getting me in this situation. Somewhere in the middle of all of this going on, I really hit the end of my ability to cope. And I went up into the church and sat in one of the pews and cried out to God. I said, I can't do this. I am gonna break my body. I don't have the power left. I don't have the strength left, and I have no idea what to do. That was when I really felt like I had turned toward him. I'd been running away for a long time. I did not want to deal with what God might be wanting. But as I started to turn, I saw that he had already done so much in my life, and that he was going to continue to do that. I was brought up that people were good, and it wasn't until I understood that none of us are, that we are all sinners. Because I'm a sinner, I can't have true communion with God. He loved me, this messy person here, enough to send his son to come to this earth, show us his way, and be willing to die for me. In response to that, it's like, how can I not do things for you? I could have died 30 years ago. He saved me. And we know that in all things, God works for the good of those who love him and have been called according to his purpose. All things that God does have a reason. And even though they may seem horrible at a time, they really are for his purposes. I had really worked at doing everything in my own strength and in my own and my. That's all I knew. I had to let go. I had to follow him. That changed the trajectory of my life completely. I was one of those crazy on fire and baby Christians. I couldn't learn enough. I realized all the things I hadn't been taught. So that was really when I got to understand that I could have, and if I gave my life to Christ, that I would have that really personal relationship. I understood slowly that I needed to forgive him. But I would tell you it took at least 15 years to slowly feel like, okay, I've forgiven you. It's still very hard to want to pray for him. The thought of seeing him in heaven is not at all something I look forward to. But I know that I will not be the same either, so I got to live with that, and God really doesn't want anybody lost, so you never know. That's still healing, and there are pieces that probably I will still be healing until he takes me home. Well, now that I can look back and see that it was God protecting me, I would tell you he protected me from losing my life. He kept my children alive and my parents alive, my sister alive. He gave me privacy with a new name until the trial, protected me from the judicial system, but he also provided an awful lot for me. He gave me words to help my boys work through this process. He gave me security living with my parents. One of the biggest things he did was eventually he brought my current husband into my life. There's almost no comparing my current marriage to Mike to that other one. First of all, I am equally yoked with a godly man. We have the same values. We talk about how do we glorify God in all of this. It's nothing like what I had before or could have ever imagined. There are no blankets left to peel off. It's not a part of any of us anymore. Now here I am getting training for soul care, for biblical counseling. If I can help one woman who has been through or is going through something awful, then I've made a difference. I couldn't have dreamt of it, but God knew what he was doing.